So just before we embark, a little bit about myself, and then we'll get into the presentation. I experienced the value of supportive coaching and mentoring at work and as an aspirant ski instructor. Those experiences got me off to a flying start when I did seasons excuse me, in Scotland and qualified with mountain-based instructor awards. All these experiences influenced my career, and stepping out of engineering, I did a 10-year stint as manager and head of ski school at Gloucester Ski Centre, during which time I qualified as a level 4 coach. And I ran the ski school based on the philosophies of the Snow Sport England Coach Awards. As I got more involved with the governing body and became a tutor, I started writing coach education material and was asked to become chairman of the coaching technical panel. I'm now self-employed, coaching and mentoring in engineering and doing snow sports consultancy. I've mentored numerous engineers and ski coaches and trained other mentors. I'm a senior tutor for Snow Sport England and head coach of Gloucester Disabled Skiers, where I specialise in coaching the visually impaired and skiers with learning difficulties. If you want to know more, you can find me on LinkedIn or on my website, barbarassociates.co.uk. Suffice to say, I'm passionate about snow sports and the value of workplace training. So enough about me, and on to the presentation. These are the contents of the session this evening. A background to the awards scheme and why we have mentoring and supervision within it, some principles of mentoring and supervision, aspects of learning to teach, and gaining the maximum use out of the workbooks. The origins of the National Coaching Scheme date back to 1975. Since that time, it's developed across all disciplines in the recreational and competition strands of the sport. On the recreational side, this is how it currently looks. The various levels of instructor through to development coach. These awards fit with one of the purposes of the governing body, which is to provide local access to the sport. In other words, to get them into it, retain them, and make it a sport for life. Many of our top performers took up the sport locally with Snow Sport England instructors and coaches, and Snow Sport Wales instructors and coaches, and now perform on the world stage. All of the people in these pictures accessed the sport locally in the UK and got to the world stage with the help of Snow Sport England and Wales qualified instructors and coaches. Pat Sharples, bottom right, who was freestyle coach and is now the head coach of GB Snow Sport, regularly attends our annual conference and always comments on the value that he gets from it. You may have noticed from the previous slide that all awards include periods of workplace training, highlighted here in the gold band. At level 1 and 2, this is very structured and involves the completion of a workbook, which I'll give you insight into later on. The workbooks were developed in collaboration with a broad range of industry partners, including facility managers, heads of ski schools, coaches, and tutors. A fundamental element of the UK Snow Sport Coach Awards is that there must be structured, practical teaching experience. After all, you learn to teach by teaching. So effective mentoring and supervised experience during this training phase has a significant impact on both the candidates learning to teach and their success at assessments. So let's look at some of the principles of mentoring and supervision. And firstly, some reasons for the methodology that the governing bodies have. There are complementary reasons for adopting this approach. Firstly, collaboration. The governing bodies recognise that individual slopes and clubs are just that. They're individual. They're running a business, or they're a not-for-profit enterprise, such as a club slope. Everyone operates differently, and Snowsport England, Snowsport Wales, we don't see it as our job to tell your staff how to teach. Our courses educate them about what to teach. The how to teach bit is mostly done in the workplace. So that's collaboration. On optimizing the learning, that's about working with real learners in real time with real teaching challenges rather than a course-based scenario approach. And affordability. Most people that instruct and coach are volunteers or are doing it for not much money, and they're doing it locally. My slope's 3 miles away from me. They're not professional instructors, as in professional meaning that it's their primary source of income. And research shows that 900,000 people are involved in coaching sport in England, and 76% of those are volunteers. Consequently, there need to be local structures of coaching, mentoring, guidance and support to help each individual aspirant instructor plan, do and review their learning. This is a person-centered approach to help them complete their learning based on a learning needs analysis and at a pace that fits in with their lives. So we've got a variety of roles, the names of which have been in the title of the session and some others. And when I think back to my first steps as an instructor, the right pace for me involved taking the best part of actually 2 winters of part-time learning at Gloucester Ski Centre to complete my first award. And to optimise this learning phase, there are some key personnel. Well, first of all, you've got the candidate themselves. They've done a training course, they need ongoing support. Mentors, they oversee the process and contribute to many parts of it. And supervisors, they provide the opportunity to learn on the slopes, actually out there delivering sessions. So there's likely to be more supervisors than mentors, and the supervisors themselves ought to receive mentoring for the role. So of course we have a coach award scheme and we've got lots of coaches. Around the UK we have a big network of qualified coaches who have learnt through the same system. Lots of slopes now have access to a pool of level 3 and level 4 coaches, and they're a great resource, as many have done their own coaching portfolios based on coaching aspirant instructors. So many of the people that are acting as mentors in particular are likely to be level 3, level 4 coaches, and supervisors will be a range of personnel, as I'll go on to describe. We don't have time today, but an essential difference between a coach and instructor is them being equipped to develop long-term coaching plans with their skiers. And that's an important aspect of mentoring, because the duration of each plan will be centered around the candidates having profiled their base level at the start of the process. So let's get into mentoring. What is mentoring? Stop and reflect for a moment. Think about people from whom you sought advice and guidance by tapping into their experience. Picture them in your mind. And feel free to type your memories into the chat box on the system. But thinking about those people, and I can think of some of the mentors along the way that I've experienced, whether they knew it or not, they were probably being an informal mentor. You may have taken heed of their advice verbatim, or used it as part of your thinking about a situation. But whatever happened, your thoughts and actions will have been influenced by that interaction. So I'll leave you to read this. This is a definition that I shaped from a variety of sources. But for the sake of the tape, it's a developmental process in which a more experienced person shares their knowledge with a less experienced person through a series of interactions. So there are key elements of this: knowledge sharing, drawing on experience, and that it takes place over time. Now, in this context, mentors need appropriate snow sport experience, qualifications, specialist knowledge, and attributes complementary to the role. They should be qualified to at least the level above the award that the candidate is training towards, and have significant experience. A snow sport mentor will normally have significant teaching and/or coaching experience and a level of authority at the centre or club to make decisions about the format of workplace training. They'll know about the award pathway, the standards needed to pass the assessment, and be able to guide the candidates through the process. These insights are really important to help steer the process and the effectiveness of mentoring interventions to keep the trainee on track. Remember, if they were like me, they were holding down a day job whilst coming and doing this in their spare time. So the more efficient and effective you can make it, the better. So let's take a look at the mentoring process. The mentor oversees the candidate's progress through the workplace training. This involves things like providing an induction about the workplace training, monitoring progress through each unit of the workbook, that the workbook is being used and effectively, and then corroborated on completion. So this is a very similar process to coaching, in that you're profiling, goal setting, planning, there's some skill development activities, it's monitored and evaluated as it goes along, and reprofiled periodically during the process. So on profiling, everybody that comes to you as a candidate will have different experiences, different backgrounds. They'll come with different baggage. They'll come with different attributes already developed in some areas. So part of the profiling exercise is to find out what they already know and what they need to know in order to pass the award and complete the workplace training. And that information helps set goals. So for instance, in my time at Gloucester, I had a number of instructors that were school teachers. They already know an awful lot about teaching and could probably teach me a lot about teaching. So that helps with an understanding of where their learning needs are. I'll give some other examples later on. You then go into goal setting. What is the objective? What time period am I going to take and aim to get the workplace training done and to go for my assessment? What's the realism around that? Can I get to the slope often enough to do that, and so on? So what's the timescale? How am I going to go about doing it? Is it on certain evenings, certain weekends? Where am I going to do it? Is it at my local slope? Is it other places as well? and when. Leading on to the actual skill development itself. And remember, these are trainee instructors, candidate instructors. So there's a couple of dimensions to the skill development that they're going to do. We're majoring today on the learning to teach using the workbook as a tool. But equally, everybody that's been on the course will have had feedback about their personal skiing and their development needs within their personal skiing, be it actually how they ski, but also how they demonstrate. So there will be some development needs around that as well. So coaches who are licensed at level 3 and 4, as I mentioned earlier on, have experience of instructor development are a great starting point when seeking a mentor. Not only that, they've also actively trained through the coaching awards system, so they've got good insight into it. But not all qualified people have got the skill or interest in mentoring. And it's important to recognize this and for them not to take on the role. A significant part of mentoring is the art of conversation. Some of the key learning that's identified in the workbook, such as personal standards, health and safety, personal development needs, actually often benefit from off-slope conversation. Candidates will need time to learn about the centre's standards and policies, with this learning reinforced through conversation and writing down those key learning points. So in addition to this off-slope learning, the mentor may also provide supervision of on-slope activities, the learning how to teach. And it will be likely there will be several other supervisors who will oversee this part of the process. And there's a spectrum of interventions. Someone once said to me that we're all on a spectrum somewhere. Candidates will be developing their teaching, their demonstrations, their personal skiing during this period of time. So they'll need a variety of different interventions. On the left-hand side of the spectrum here, they may be being coached on their personal skiing performance. They may then need to be taught some stuff. And that might be things around the standard operating procedures of the facility and so on and so forth. They may need mentoring interventions. So the things we've talked about around the workbook and going through the various sections of that. And they'll need supervision. So be aware of this, and you may need to change roles and be a chameleon by sliding along this spectrum to be in the best role at that moment. And again, someone once said to me about changing hats. You have a different hat for each of these different roles, and if you can imagine that you've got 4 different hats, one with coaching, one with teaching, one with mentoring, and one with supervision on. And it's good to self-check where you are in that moment and whether you're in the best role for the individual. So let's start looking at the right-hand side of this and the supervisors. Every candidate's different, and they have a different starting place or profile. As I leave you to read this list of the qualities of useful supervisors, I wanted to share with you the profiles of a few candidates I've experienced over the years. You might recognize some of these. Young person, great skier, easily led astray, hormones racing, lots of life stuff going on, needs a strong role model. Tactic there is to avoid distractions by choosing supervisors very carefully and matching them appropriately. one I've alluded to already. A school teacher, head of department, can actually teach me a lot about teaching and how to develop children. Their interest was in learning about ski teaching more in the context of managing school trips and getting them set up. Able in their case to actually discriminate who the best supervisors were. Next one, ex-army, then manager of a care home, significant experience of working with people on the autism spectrum. They knew a lot about people, and especially command and control teaching. The profile there was developed through developing underpinning knowledge and teaching styles other than command and control. And the last one for now, a mid-career scientist with a highly theoretical approach, strong views, hard to break the mold, overwhelmed their skiers with excessive technical chat, but blissfully unaware that he was only connecting with a small proportion of the group. Not an easy one, that one, but I'm not giving you the solutions today. But supervisors are qualified personnel who facilitate the on-slope learning by supervising practical experience. Again, after all, you learn to teach by teaching. And the centre or club should decide on and publish a list of people that are authorised to supervise trainees. That's a local decision. Supervisors have and perform a responsible role. They'll be supporting trainees at various stages of development and taking overarching responsibility for maintaining safe practice. But hopefully you agree the attributes on the side there, from qualified through to sound risk perception, are all useful attributes for supervisors. And those of you that are on the presentation this evening that are in roles that are choosing and deploying supervisors, you might want to think about that and consider using a profile like the one on the right hand side or something similar by which to weigh up which of your personnel you feel are the most suited to be supervisors. Remember, they need to be qualified and knowledgeable, so it's unlikely you'll put a rookie instructor out, and you shouldn't put a rookie instructor out as a supervisor. Not all the staff will possess the right blend of these qualities, so it is absolutely fine to be selective about who you use as supervisors out on your slope. So let's get on to the bit that the candidate is working on, learning to teach. Coach education often uses the skill acquisition model with the learning stages of awareness, practice, and acquired skill. Okay, the same applies when learning to teach, and we've broken it down into the following development stages of shadowing, helping, and supervised instructing. The shadowing phase is one where candidates expand their awareness by information gathering, mainly through observation and discussion. Candidates should watch lessons delivered by experienced instructors to learn about things such as the range of lessons that they will be authorized to teach once they're qualified, entry and exit standards required for group lessons, creating engaging and enjoyable lessons, managing risk, common tasks that can be used during lessons, types of demonstrations that might be needed, typical faults to spot for and methods for correction, how feedback is provided, what the centre's or club's preferred teaching progression is, managing the timing of sessions so that they're concluded and reviewed and customers are signposted to their next actions. So shadowing provides the foundations of knowledge necessary before starting to assist the delivery of sessions. For this reason, it's sensible for shadowing to be done with experienced instructors only, and who exhibit the good habits that should be emulated. So, for instance, placing them with an instructor known for subverting your ski school philosophy does not normally go well. And if you do encounter that, you might want to consider what training that individual needs to help keep their job as an instructor. So the development of that underpinning knowledge doesn't stop there, and it continues into the next phase of helping. Helping involves assisting experienced instructors by doing things like giving demonstrations, setting up or removing cones that are used as task markers, or giving individual attention to one of the class as agreed with the supervising instructor. It builds the candidate's understanding of the teaching progression, how to teach, and the types of tasks that can be set for the learners and that are appropriate for them. The supervisor needs to be comfortable that the candidate can reasonably handle the situation that they've been asked to help with. And in my experience, these judgments can be supported by the candidates regularly working with the same small group of supervisors, enabling rapport to develop. This normally helps with structuring the progressive development and the teaching practice. I remember in my own case, when the lessons were structured in such a way that the same customers were coming back for 5 weeks every Monday, that I could actually work with the same group of skiers too, and that was excellent for my progress because I could see the progression through with the same people and also develop rapport with them as their instructor. At this stage and the next one, it's important to understand that the candidate is under supervision. They shouldn't be left on their own, and the supervisor needs to be nearby on the slope to provide support and intervene if needed. Okay, the supervisor is ultimately responsible for the conduct of the lesson. Which takes us on to the next stage, supervised instructing. And once the candidate has developed sufficient understanding and confidence, it's time to put this into practice and take responsibility for teaching part or all of lessons. The supervisor steps back so that the candidate is perceived by the pupils as being the person in charge, i.e. their instructor. However, they're able to intervene if they perceive a potential risk is in need of mitigation, or for instance, the customer's enjoyment level is insufficient. Also, the supervisor and candidate will be involved in reflective review of the session afterwards. So they need to hear what's being said. Otherwise, how do you give feedback to the candidate? So the supervisor must be attentive and close by. So it's not time to sneak off for a coffee in the bar or to go and have a chat with a friend. The candidate will also need to devise lesson plans and evaluate their success through a process of self-reflection and discussion with the supervisor after each session. Templates for this are provided in the workbook. Time should be made for this valuable preparation and the post-lesson reflection, review, and time for feedback. And I can still remember quite vividly some of those reflection and feedback sessions some 30 years on. In the background on this slide, you can see the lesson log, and it's really important to keep records. All helping, shadowing, and supervised hours should be recorded in the workbook. This record is reviewed as part of the assessment and does influence the assessor's selection of areas for further verification and assessment. Candidates need to log a minimum of 20 supervised hours before applying for assessment. In my experience, many of the good candidates do significantly more than this. So the lesson log is part of the workbook, and there are some other sections as well. So let's get on to using the workbook. The workbook is currently A4 printed. That was after experimentation on the original format in a couple of different formats, and was found to be of a useful size and to be handy in the boot bag for active use. And there are these 9 sections. There's not time to cover them all today, so I'm just going to highlight 3 of them now. Numbers 3, 5, and 6. So on to 3, slope specifics. The facilities played a strong part in devising this section of the workbooks, and crucially it covers safety, first aid, and so on. Accidents happen, and knowing what the procedure is so you can act calmly, make the injured person safe, and organise the right interventions is really, really important. Not only might this impact on their immediate well-being, but it may also impact on their attitude towards returning to the sport. It's very important for there to be a record of health and safety learning. I can think of someone I was supervising when there was an accident within a session, and through no fault of the trainee instructor, but the reaction of the parent to that accident and the aftermath of that caused that trainee to drop out of the sport for a while whilst they recovered from the emotions of that thing. So training to help with these aspects of health and safety is really important. Section 5, learning to teach. This is where the supervisors play a significant part because it's the bits that you do out on the hill. And there are some key components to that, and we do witness a variety of the use of these within the workbooks. So there's some template lesson planners. It's not the only way to plan a lesson, but in terms of setting out a plan for what you're intending to do, what the outcome goals are of a session, the sorts of activities you're going to use in order to try and secure that outcome for the learners, to make sure that you meet with the needs of the ski school by creating those outcomes, is a very important process. So please get the candidates to use those. You may well already have at your centre a set lesson structure, but it's also worth carrying out this activity as a learning process to figure out how you're going to structure a lesson and realise how time can fly. There's also some supervisor checklists, and these are intended for when the candidate is in the phase, the latter phase, where they're actually out on slope being supervised to teach. So they're actually taking the lead role. And these checklists give an opportunity to go through and see how the individual is structuring the session and how they're looking after the customers and meeting the goals and so on and so forth. So really worthwhile activity to do. And the lesson log we mentioned earlier on, really important to log everything. I've still got mine and can look back to see my own development and how I'm improving. Great for the self-awareness of the candidate, as well as a record that's necessary at the assessment stage. And then Unit 6, corroboration. Once the workbook is completed, there's a simple form, this one you can see here, for the candidate, mentor and representative of the facility to sign. The mentor's corroborating that this is the work of the candidate. The endorsement is a formal process requiring an official from the centre or club to signify that they consider the candidate to be suitably skillful to perform the role unsupervised and ready for assessment. If these aren't filled in when the candidates go for assessment, it's probable they will be declined access to the assessment. So again, really important. And if the workbook is being used well, there are prompts within the workbook to make sure that this process takes place. So, on to conclusions. The UK Snow Sport Coaching Award Scheme recognises the need for suitable and sufficient workplace training and experience conducted in a structured, safe learning environment. It's built on a long-standing partnership of collaboration between the governing bodies and operators to produce the next generation of instructors and coaches to serve the needs of the participants and the sport as a whole. Experience at assessments demonstrates that the best prepared candidates have made full use of the workbook by following a structured learning approach, facilitated by skillful mentors and supervisors. Incomplete workbooks will almost certainly result in an assessment result of not yet competent. So please make full use of the workbook. It's a tool aimed at helping all those in the process, candidates, mentors, supervisors, and the facilities they're based at, to succeed. So let's get on and inspire participation in snow sport at every level.